Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I think there's still people joining the call, but we want to be conscious of everybody's time and appreciate you joining us. My name is Mark Becker. I'm the founding partner of Cathexis Partners, and this the webinar today is a very interesting and topical one, what every nonprofit should know about cryptocurrency. If you want to go to the next slide. I have everybody automatically muted, so there's no additional distractions as there can be on these size webinars. So if you have any questions, we definitely want this to be as interactive as possible. So feel free to ask any questions you might have in the question box in the GoToWebinar control panel. And definitely let us know your questions. Ask them as you think of them. We'll get around to them as soon as possible, and we'll definitely leave time at the end for additional questions. Okay, next slide. Again, my name is Mark Becker. I'm the founding partner of Cathexis Partners. We started the company a little over 10 years ago now, helping nonprofits raise more funds online via their websites and their CRM support. We did a very small piece of working with the Lupus Foundation on helping getting the cryptocurrency environment set up in their Luminate instance, but by far the lion's share, the vast majority of the work was done with Alex and Pat. So I've invited these two guys along to speak today, and I'm very grateful to have them. So Alex, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. So my background was really in more traditional management consulting, strategy, operations, and IT consulting. And part of that started to become some enterprise blockchain consulting. And around that same time, I started investing in a number of cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and Ethereum, some of the big ones, and kind of went down the rabbit hole. Got really interested in this technology, kept learning more and more about it. Then did some venture capital work in the blockchain and cryptocurrency space, and have been focusing on that ever since, and have now turned my attention to, how can this technology be used to help nonprofits. And I'll let Pat introduce himself and kind of talk a little bit more about how this all started. So go ahead, Pat.
Sure. So I started off as a federal consultant for pharma prior to joining the Lupus Foundation in the Alliance Development Wing. So focused on relationships with nonprofits. Alex, toward the end of 2017, started sending me articles on cryptocurrency. I started to read a little bit more, and then began trading toward the end of 2017 with Alex. And around that time, we started seeing more stories about nonprofits receiving cryptocurrency donations. And given the amount of time and energy that Alex and our free time were spending on cryptocurrency, we decided that LFA should start accepting crypto donations, and that Alex and I should be strategic about how to incorporate this and find community partners. And then I guess the last piece would be we were lucky enough to have a CEO in Steve Gibson who was open-minded to it, and beyond being open-minded is now sending us articles and reading up late at night on his own. So he wanted to not only open the wallets, but really dive in, reach out to the community, and cultivate a program here.
Great. So Mark, I'll let you go ahead with the agenda.
Yeah, so again, what we want to cover today, it can be a pretty heady topic, but again, you got a couple of great experts here to help you navigate this. So first of all, Alex is going to be covering, what cryptocurrency is and how and why nonprofits should be considering this as part of your portfolio, and then a great case study with Pat and the Lupus Foundation. And then a little bit more about the Giving Block, which is Alex's company and the services they offer, because you can navigate all this, and he's going to give you some tips on what to consider and all that. You can navigate this all on your own, but definitely having an expert like Alex will save you a lot of time and get you a lot more connections and into the community. And then, of course, time at the end for questions and answers as well.
Awesome.
All right. So before we go into and have Alex start this, I wanted to go ahead and do a little poll just to see how familiar folks were with cryptocurrency. So let me see if I can get that up here. So now you should see on your screen a question: how familiar are you with cryptocurrency and blockchain? And if you could just take a moment to have everybody select one of those. I'll just give folks a moment here. I see votes coming in. I'll just give it a few more moments. Be great to allow people time to do that here. All right, I think we're pretty good. I'm going to give it another 10 seconds, and then I'll close that out. Looks like there's a couple that are very familiar. Some are somewhat familiar, and about the same amount are not very familiar. And then there's definitely a few that are like no idea. So pretty good mix, but the majority of folks, probably 85 to 87%, are in those two middle, somewhat / not very familiar. So thanks for taking the time. It's just good to know what we're seeing here as far as responses.
Yeah, and hopefully, at the end of this presentation, people will have a better understanding of this and at least feel comfortable with some of the basics.
Terrific. So make that happen.
All right, so let's start off at a very high level. What is cryptocurrency? Most of you, even if you don't know too much about cryptocurrency, you've probably heard about Bitcoin, which was the first cryptocurrency that was launched 10 years ago by an anonymous person or group of people going by the alias of Satoshi Nakamoto. And the idea behind this was to create essentially an internet money, kind of a digital cash that could be exchanged online, truly peer-to-peer, with no, let's say, intermediary like a bank controlling those transactions. Since then, we've seen a lot more interest in sort of this cryptocurrency, or this digital money, and we've seen over 3,000 different cryptocurrencies pop up since then. One important thing to note is there's often a little bit of confusion. You hear the term cryptocurrency and blockchain sometimes used interchangeably. One thing to keep in mind is that Bitcoin was the first use case for blockchain. So blockchain is the underlying technology behind Bitcoin and many other cryptocurrencies, but it is just one of many different use cases. You're seeing it used in healthcare and insurance and media, across industries really. And this just happened to be the first and one of the most common use cases now as you see all these other cryptocurrencies pop up, but it's certainly not the only one. So to put this in context a little bit, when we had the internet in the 90s, it was confusing for people, and it was surrounded by a lot of misconceptions. People weren't sure if this was going to be a fad, what was going to happen with it. But I like to compare the 90s of the internet growth to the current growth we're seeing in the cryptocurrency industry. And if you look on the chart on the left, it might be a little hard to see, but the blue line is the estimated number of crypto users, while the red line is the number of internet users in the 90s. So based on that comparison, we're going, very closely to how things were going in the early days of the internet. And then on the right, similarly, the red line is the number of total websites in the 90s versus the blue line, which is the total crypto assets. These are all those new cryptocurrencies popping up. And you can see that trending incredibly similarly as well. So based on this, you could say we're probably in about 94 or 95 if you were to compare it to the internet growth in the 90s. And a nice video related to that we like to show is from the Today Show. I'll play this, but essentially this demonstrates, how much confusion and misconception can surround new technologies. Anytime we have these new technologies, whether it's the internet or going further back to writing and trains, telephone, there's always a lot of skepticism around them of whether it's going to be a fad, what the impact is really going to be. I think a funny one is this example of the trains. The public believed the human body could not travel at such high speeds and would die as a result. A little more recently is, of course, the internet, and this is a good example with Bill Gates. He said, I see little commercial potential for the internet for the next 10 years. And he said that in 1994. And it's funny because now he's also commented on cryptocurrencies, actually, saying I would short Bitcoin if I could. And in fact, you actually can. And it was funny because, of course, right after he said that on TV, everyone was sending him social media messages and emails telling him how he could short Bitcoin. But unfortunately, he didn't respond to anyone. And that leads me into these misconceptions we're talking about. So what you probably have heard is maybe some headlines in the news in terms of, what cryptocurrency is. Often it's negative headlines, whether that be the price is crashing. You'll often see, price is down 10%, it's over, it's done. But the fluctuations in the market are actually quite normal. And actually with our solution, you don't have to worry about this relatively strong volatility compared to more mature markets. And a good thing to clarify too is, accepting cryptocurrency donations as a nonprofit doesn't require you to invest in cryptocurrencies. So you're not buying any cryptocurrencies, you're just receiving them from users. So with our solution, you actually eliminate that risk of the volatility that you often hear about associated with Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. And one of the other things you'll often hear too is this idea that it's often used by criminals. And those are really generally overblown, but Pat actually has a great comparison for why or how to think about that.
Sure. Quickly on the volatility piece that you were mentioning also, the reason that the way the Lupus Foundation is taking crypto, volatility is not an issue, is regardless of the volatility happening for those who are trading cryptocurrencies, if they transfer cryptocurrency directly to us, we have a auto conversion API built in. So if, a minute after they send it to you, the price has changed, that's not a concern for us and people using Alex's solution because it's automatically converting when it hits your wallet. On the delinquent use example, a lot of people say cryptocurrency makes, selling drugs or whatever else it is online easier. And I like to just, like Alex said, with other innovative technologies, cars certainly made it easier to sell drugs. The internet made it easier to sell drugs. Cryptocurrency would make it easier to sell drugs because it's an easier way to use money. And a really kind of funny example, but performance cars were invented by moonshiners in the US who were upgrading engines to try to outrun the police. Again, people using it for one thing versus another, much like delinquent activity on the internet or anything else. It's not necessarily tied to the exact underlying technology. And the DA and the FBI now currently are very public on the record saying they prefer when criminals use cryptocurrency because though it is pretty easy to use online, the issue with it is the blockchain technology behind it makes it the most traceable form of money that we've ever had. So there's a permanent record of all of their nefarious transactions, I suppose.
Yeah, and going off of that, it's funny actually. I was just reading an article recently about a kidnapping in Costa Rica, and the kidnapper demanded a ransom in Bitcoin actually, and soon after they paid the ransom, they actually caught the kidnapper only because he used Bitcoin, and they were able to follow the money to him. If it had been, let's say, some other form of paying off the ransom, they wouldn't have been able to trace it as well as they were, and they caught the guy who was the kidnapper a day later. Another common point we often get is, can cryptocurrency be stolen? You might have read about cryptocurrency exchanges being hacked. This isn't the cryptocurrency itself being hacked, but where they're being stored. And in the solution from the Giving Block, this actually isn't a concern because everything's being converted within 10 seconds, like Pat said, to US dollars or your local currency. And once it is converted to local currency, it's actually put into custodial bank accounts that are FDIC insured up to $250,000. So you don't have to worry about, somehow losing those funds. Another common question we get is, what is backing cryptocurrencies? It's very different than physical paper money. But I like to point out that, paper money in the US or the US dollar more broadly isn't backed by gold or other precious metals. It's really just this trust we place in in the currency. With cryptocurrencies, it's funny because in a lot of ways it's actually backed by more than the US dollar because it has this underlying technology behind it where you know exactly what you're getting. And what I mean by that is the way it functions and the way it works in all regards is predetermined algorithmically. So with Bitcoin, for example, there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin, 17 million of which are currently in circulation. But for example, you won't have issues of hyperinflation like you're seeing in Venezuela, because in this case, it's not possible for a government to, let's say, print more Bitcoin.
And to piggyback on that real quick, again, this is another concern. This is more or less just explaining for those who trade cryptocurrency, some of the concerns around it. If you are a nonprofit, if Bitcoin is worth $10,000 and they want to make a $1,000 donation in Bitcoin, or Bitcoin is worth $1,000 and they want to make a $1,000 donation in Bitcoin, it doesn't make a difference for the nonprofit. The backing and the volatility, whatever they send to you, that's what you get. So again, you're not owning it and trading it, which is a point of misconception as well.
Right, and that leads me to another point. Actually, you'll often hear people call Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies more broadly a bubble. And sure, any asset at any time can be overvalued and be deemed a bubble, just like we saw with the housing market in 2008. But even after those bubbles, let's say with the dot-com bubble in 2000, that doesn't discredit the internet just because we had a bubble in the valuations of internet-related companies. So the market has gone these relatively strong fluctuations in price, but it doesn't in any way discredit the legitimacy of the technology. The last piece I want to cover real quick, and of course we'll take questions later on too for things we don't cover. We just wanted to get a couple of the main ones out of the way. So it's in terms of regulations. People sometimes say, oh, is cryptocurrency really regulated? How regulated is it? And it's actually more regulated than most people realize, I think. So the cryptocurrency exchanges where the trading is happening, where the buying and selling is happening, are regulated similar to banks in terms of the compliance and the regulations that apply to them. When people are signing up to trade cryptocurrency, they actually have to verify their identity, tied to their bank account. So it's much more regulated than you think. The SEC, the CFTC, and the IRS all has guidelines on it. But if I missed anything, we'll cover it later, but we're going to move on for now. And this brings me to my next point. We mentioned the volatility and the fluctuating prices earlier. It's interesting because despite the changes in the price over the last couple of years, we're seeing the user base, people using cryptocurrency growing incredibly quickly. So Coinbase is the largest US exchange. And in November of 2017, they had 13 million accounts. In March 2018, that had grown to 20 million customers. And by as recently as October 2018, that was 25 million customers. And as of right now, they're still adding 25,000 users per day. And this is just one exchange. This is happening at other exchanges around the world too, but this is an example of the largest US-based exchange. So now we're going to talk about more specifically nonprofits in crypto, how nonprofits can benefit from cryptocurrency, and some examples in the space. And here we read the technology or the Global NGO Technology Report in 2018, and that found that less than 1% are currently accepting Bitcoin donations, less than 1% of nonprofits. So even less than that are taking something beyond Bitcoin. And there's a really great quote here from the CEO of Charity Navigator, who does also take cryptocurrency donations. And what he says is, this is a real thing for fundraising, an opportunity to meet some donors where they are or where they might be soon, which is what we all try to do. Everyone should move toward it at their own pace and comfort level, but it's definitely something we all should consider as an option for donors. And you'll see on the left here some logos of some of the big names taking cryptocurrency. Some of these organizations are, surprisingly large, like Save the Children United Way. The Giving Block is working with a handful of these, like Lupus Foundation, Dementia Society, Beat the Streets, talking to Charity Navigator, and the Human Rights Foundation as well. So the number of charities accepting cryptocurrencies is growing, but it's still incredibly unique, and it won't be unique forever, essentially. Right now, when a charity announces they're taking cryptocurrency and wants to work with this community. It's still new and exciting. So there's still a lot of room to become a leader in this space, and in a way carve out some market share. So you might be asking yourself, why are people donating in crypto, or why would they want to donate in crypto instead of using, let's say, a credit card? The main reason is really the tax benefits. So the IRS has classified cryptocurrencies as property. So that means it's treated the same way as donating stocks, cars, real estate, anything that's classified like property. And the reason that's so enticing for donors is because that means capital gains taxes do not apply, which can save them anywhere from 15 to 30 some percent, and then the full amount is tax deductible. So in the example down here, if you had a donor that wanted to give $250,000, if they were to sell their Bitcoin first and then donate the remaining funds, they'd have to pay $57,000 in taxes. But if they were donating the Bitcoin directly to your nonprofit, they could donate the full $250,000. And an additional point, unrelated to the taxes, of why people donate in cryptocurrency is purely the convenience. It's very simple for a cryptocurrency user to send cryptocurrency to an organization's cryptocurrency wallet, so they don't have to go through the process of doing the conversion and then sending you the money afterwards. So real quick on the crypto donor demographics. So according to Fortune, a survey they did last year looked at the users of cryptocurrency and found that the majority are between ages of 18 and 34. So we found this has been a really great way to engage millennials. And although this is spreading to older generations like Gen X and baby boomers, that'll continue to spread to other generations as well as we see more adoption. But right now it's pretty heavily focused with millennials. And here we've got a couple of the biggest and most well-known success stories in the space over the last approximately 18 months. So the Pineapple Fund was an individual who had made quite a bit of money investing in Bitcoin early on and donated about $56 million worth of Bitcoin to about 60 different organizations total. Then you have the example of Fidelity Charitable, where they were able to collect 69 million worth of Bitcoin donations after running a marketing campaign engaging this community. So the year before that, they had raised, I think it was something like 7 or 8 million, less than 10 million. And the following year, because they had a marketing campaign and they started to engage this community, they brought in $69 million worth of Bitcoin donations. And then Ripple, the last example, Ripple is actually a company behind a cryptocurrency, XRP. It's one of the largest in the space, and they have donated over $100 million to a variety of nonprofits. $50 million to universities. They did $4 million to the Ellen DeGeneres Wildlife Fund, and actually had Ashton Kutcher do it live on the show, which was pretty cool. But these are three different examples. The Pineapple Fund being an individual, Fidelity Charitable being a nonprofit donor advised fund, and Ripple being a major organization in the space. And
before we move on to Alex, there was one question so far. How do you get or obtain cryptocurrency?
If you are if let's say you want to use or just buy cryptocurrency for any reason, I guess would be the question.
That's how I'm interpreting it, yeah.
And how do they donate?
Okay. So the easiest way is to sign up for a cryptocurrency exchange like Coinbase, which is if you're in the US, that's the largest one in the US. They operate internationally as well, but I'd have to check which country. But it's a relatively painless process. You go through and fill out some basic information. Think of it almost like signing up for a bank account. You fill out your name, your email, your address. They verify your identity with your driver's license, and then you would link your bank account or credit card and buy, either Bitcoin or Ethereum or one of the other major cryptocurrencies. It would be totally up to you. And then once you buy that cryptocurrency, you would have it in your Coinbase account. You could either keep it there if you wanted to, let's say, donate it to a nonprofit or spend it on something. You would go to the nonprofit's website. The nonprofit would have their wallet address, which is where their cryptocurrency donations come into before they're converted. And the donor would copy and paste that wallet address into their Coinbase account and say, I want to send, let's say 1 Bitcoin or half a Bitcoin to X charity. And then the charity would get that donation. And within 10 seconds of the donation coming through, it would be converted to US dollars.
Great, thanks.
All right, well, I'll hand it over to Pat now to talk a little bit more about the Lupus Foundation.
Awesome. Okay, so the first slide here, what you see on the right side of the page is the press that we got within the cryptocurrency community following the announcement that we were beginning to accept crypto. So Alex mentioned this earlier. It's really interesting right now, the media and marketing piece of accepting crypto and how you work with this community is an incredibly valuable part of the system we're finding. And an interesting piece, like looking at that example he gave of the Pineapple Fund, when the market is booming, there are surges in the donations that you see and people giving, they're taking advantage of the tax benefits. But even when the market is going down, the community is still incredibly active. And they see nonprofits, as far as we can tell, just by the simple act of opening wallets as, a legitimizing variable for them. It's showing that true traditional stakeholders are getting into the space. And then we go a little further beyond that. But just so our first press release here, down the left side, you'll see mentioned 30 times on blockchain media sites and in articles, talked about in 20 plus chat rooms. And the note at the bottom there, this happened just within the first 30 days of the press release, which was in October of last year. Dozens of times on forums, which are targeted areas where people have conversations about specific cryptocurrencies or other more nuanced conversations, 20 plus thousand views, and then 25,000 impressions from the Giving Block Twitter. And not to knock Alex at all, but he doesn't have, a staggering following, but he did a great job being targeted and getting it out to the right people. And then a broader point about this whole piece, before we move on to the next slide, is it's kind of interesting. We all laugh, I assume, when you're watching that Today Show video of people talking about the internet, and how little they understand it and how new it was. But I think it would be fairly fair to say that most of us still don't really get how the internet works, technologically, that is. What we do understand is how it interacts with us, and how we interface with it and how it affects the world around us. And the reason that I make that point is that the real important thing to learn is not necessarily how cryptocurrency works, but what are the incentives for donors, what are the incentives for organizations in the space, and why this phenomenon right now, while the market is sort of in an early stage, is happening, where people get fired up when charities step in. So can we move on to the next slide, which talks a little bit more? So this looks like a lot, but it wasn't necessarily a lot of work. So this is since October. We're still pretty early in our system, but I'll start here on the left side, education. So that first one-on-one education was, Alex and I putting our heads together and determining, based on his more extensive knowledge of the blockchain space and a little bit about what I know about nonprofits, what are the things that the team at LFA needed to know. So we walked through that first, got everyone to understand it, and then we did a second education where Alex came in and talked to the full management team about the implications and sort of where we felt like we were heading. The technology piece, we accept cryptocurrency donations, of course, but that blockchain technology that Alex mentioned, there's an overlap there between the crypto and the blockchain community, and we currently have an RFP out for a blockchain project, which we're excited about. And that's another way, and you can look up nonprofits who are using blockchain in their operations to improve transparency based on the way they're doing the record keeping and however else they're using it. when you use blockchain technology, which is a little bit more advanced, that's another great indicator to the community that you're getting involved, and it's another great reason to reach out to folks in the community and show that you're willing to partner. Fundraising piece, we shifted fairly early on now that we're doing the RFP to try to do the blockchain project and do more partner outreach, sort of like a major gifts campaign in the sense that we're trying to meet the right people and schedule meetings for 2019. But before the year ended, we did have our annual gala, and we had QR codes on every table. We had the guy on stage during the mission call. He had the names flagged for the folks that we invited from the crypto blockchain community. We had a couple tables shouting out to them, saying, "Where are my crypto people at?" which we found hilarious and inspiring. But QR codes on every table, and people were able to just scan the QR code and send us donations in crypto. So it was a fun and exciting way to change up the event, get a little more attention around it. And then we partnered with a crypto crowdfunding platform. So in 2019, we're looking at ways to do, co-marketing, co-branding, and use that as a tool to reach out to the community more. On the awareness piece, press release was the first item. We've done a little bit of social media, but we're developing a more targeted plan in 2019. Some of it will be around tax season, reminding folks that there are tax benefits if they have gains in their cryptocurrency assets to donate to nonprofits, and we want to be at the front of that line. Presented at Blockchain East in New York City, so our CEO, Steve Gibson, joined me for that one. And he came along, and that was after our press release, and we were excited that a couple people there already knew that we were taking crypto. So again, bravo to Alex on that. Published an article in CIO Review, which is a good resource. I can ask Alex to send that out to everyone along with the other materials after the webinar on what crypto blockchain means for nonprofits. And then collaborative post articles, etc. Blockchain events. This piece is interesting. So for blockchain events, there are conferences, both for blockchain and crypto, sometimes at the intersection, where folks get together and they talk about, the ways the technology is being leveraged. Sometimes they'll have a social impact track. Other times it'll be more finance focused. But we've been able to attend a few of these events and meet partners. So a great part of that is just by showing up. There aren't a whole lot of nonprofits showing up and trying to meet folks. And we're hoping to, down the road, have more formal partnerships with some of the bigger ones. Having a nonprofit partner for a conference, you see it happening in other industries. We don't see why it couldn't happen in blockchain and crypto. And then on the partners piece for 2019, we are currently in the process of beginning to execute the 2019 plan, which is going to be focused on reaching out to organizations in the space like Coinbase, Alex mentioned, and others, exchanges, foundations behind individual cryptocurrencies, and say we are looking to partner. They need legitimacy. They need to be seen by traditional news and traditional stakeholders as being legitimate. And we wouldn't hate to have some of their money. So that's kind of the basic strategy behind that piece. And then down at the bottom here, kind of to sum up the whole reason we're diving into this, we look at a few organizations, and it goes beyond this list, but we see them as inspiring because of the way that they're executing and the value of their execution. So the Human Rights Foundation, they have Alex Gladstein as their Chief Innovation Officer. He got into cryptocurrency, feels like pretty recently, but because he has a Human Rights Foundation, he views cryptocurrency because it is detached from the control of certain forms of regulation and tyrannical dictatorships. He sees it as a tool against tyranny. Examples like Venezuela, Alex mentioned, you can't inflate or you can't have mass inflation with cryptocurrency because it auto releases. They can't print money. Their money has become useless, so they're setting up these microeconomies in cryptocurrency. So Alex is going around. He's been met with warm reception. He's going on every podcast. He's at every major conference, going up and speaking. And that's what's inspiring our CEO to get media trained and start talking more publicly, being seen as a leader and someone who understands and wants to work with the space. Fidelity Charitable, Alex explained they had a targeted marketing approach. They reached out to the community directly on social media to leverage how fired up they get to get them more attention and to drive donations in. And then Internet Archive is just an amazing example of an organization that's doing it end to end. In 2011, the developer who developed the second biggest cryptocurrency had not yet developed it at that point, but he formed a relationship with the CEO of that organization, set up their first cryptocurrency wallets in 2011. They received 2,700 Bitcoin, which was only worth $2 at that time, sold it to an employee, which they've been kicking themselves ever since, and they're very vocal about that because obviously it appreciated greatly afterwards. But they've got, they have an ATM in their headquarters where people can walk in, donate their crypto right there on the spot, and take cash out of a little ATM there. And they're really going end to end. And they're also inspiring in the sense that they're encouraging other nonprofits to accept it. They're not trying to hoard the whole system for themselves, which I think is important for the technology to be adopted in general. So that's kind of a look at our program thus far.
Awesome. Thank you, Pat. So now to wrap things up a little bit, I want to give a quick sort of recap of what the Giving Block does and how we can work with nonprofits to help you engage this community and take cryptocurrency donations. So with the Giving Block, what we really focused on was creating a nonprofit specific solution. So there are payment processors out there that are focused on online businesses taking cryptocurrency for payment, and the biggest one being Bitpay. But they are truly just a payment processor and don't offer services around that. They don't offer education or a large variety of cryptocurrencies. Limited support, certainly not live support, and their donation fee is 1% versus 0.3%. And I just want to point these differences out because we have heard from other nonprofits who have worked with Bitpay that it doesn't really bring what they need. It's one thing to take cryptocurrency donations, but it's another thing to engage the community. So a quick overview of the overall services. I'm always happy to sit down with the organization and do essentially free introductory education that goes beyond what we talked about in this webinar. Answer any questions you might have. Let's say you do decide to move forward and want to open a cryptocurrency wallet to take donations. I can do additional education, help you with that initial press release and do that media push, make sure it gets out into all the right channels, make sure people in the crypto community, so when they look for a nonprofit to work with or donate to, make sure you're at the top of those lists. And even if even if you just do this starter package and don't take things as far as LFA is done and all these additional ways to engage the community, you naturally become part of sort of the Giving Block network just through word of mouth. I start promoting you through my circles, the conferences I go to, on social media, things like that. But there is, of course, this option to take things further and look at a very targeted approach to acquiring a partner or a KOL in the space, or looking at specific, maybe it's a healthcare conference you want to speak at, and I could help you with the media training. And then this continued digital marketing, whether that's social media, articles, blogs, or whatever else it could be throughout the year. And then the last piece would be leveraging the technology. And this is what Pat was talking about in terms of doing an actual internal blockchain project. And I just want to point out the starter package for this tailored education, the wallet solution, which has the auto sell feature and this initial press release. We charge $5,000 for that. Everything beyond that is much more customizable. You can kind of pick and choose what you want to do from there. But $5,000 is what we charge for the starter package. And then as a quick recap at the end here, for your organization, kind of the top benefits are, of course, the optics that brings. So in the nonprofit world, of course, that positions you as a leader. It's innovative. Not everyone's doing it yet. But ultimately, this could become like credit card donations where everyone's doing it. But that's probably still a couple years away. And the optics to the crypto community are just as important because, of course, if you are taking cryptocurrency donations and engaging with that community, they're going to be much more likely to donate to you, whether that's in cryptocurrency or in other methods. Fundraising, of course, is a new avenue to reach a community that you weren't reaching before. Then the piece we touched on earlier in terms of engaging millennials. This is a unique way to engage millennials. It sounds like from my conversations that this is a challenging piece for a lot of nonprofits to find a new and exciting way to get the attention of millennials. And then the general awareness, that press release Pat talked about with the Lupus Foundation. Aside from the dollars it may bring in, maybe even more important is the awareness it brings to your cause. So it's a general promotion of your cause that you're fighting for, getting that out to people who may not have heard about it before, and getting them educated on what it is that you're working on. Then from the donor perspective, we talked about the benefits from a tax perspective and a convenience perspective. And of course, for the donor, they want to heighten awareness about cryptocurrency use and adoption. One piece we don't have listed on here is the benefits for the potential partner organizations that are in the cryptocurrency and blockchain space. They're always looking for new partners to either take their cryptocurrency or do a pilot as a way to help establish them in the more mainstream. So of course they want recognition from the everyday person outside of just these cryptocurrency communities, and they're finding partnering with nonprofits is a great way to do that. So yeah, I think that about wraps things up.
Yeah, we've got some questions here.
Mark?
First of all, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I just want to throw one last piece out there, which
please do.
I was thinking might be another area of confusion. It might be confusing to some of the folks on the line why the Lupus Foundation's leadership signed off on me doing this in the first place, since so much of the value comes from it being unique and certain pockets being untapped. It's a really good point of clarity. Once everyone is using cryptocurrencies, it becomes its own financial system. Taking it is just like taking credit cards, and you want to provide that functionality. So that's a piece that exists right now. But for the time being, the fact that it's unique, the reason that I'm authorized to even, be here on this webinar and have this conversation is because there is a pool out there of cryptocurrency blockchain organizations and partners who haven't found their partners yet. And it's, I think, fairly obvious to everyone at our organization that it's not like we're gonna, run the whole gambit and work with everybody. So they see opportunities for nonprofits to work together, to partner up, to do outreach in the same ways we work with other partners in the space. And the more organizations who are doing it in a collaborative way, and the more organizations that are partnering with nonprofit partners, it's going to inspire people in the crypto blockchain community to see this as, a real opportunity and pursue it in and of their own right. And then the more we work together to get this message out there, we think it's going to be better in terms of outcomes for everybody.
Yeah, and as a final point, I just want to thank Pat too, because he spent a lot of hours outside of work developing this with me late at night, tailoring this, helping me understand nonprofits early on, and helping me find ways that we can replicate this at other organizations. But really, this was co-developed, and we spent a lot of time working on this together to find a great customized solution for nonprofits.
Yeah, well, thank you both so much. And we have had some questions pouring in while you guys were talking, so that's great. And folks on the line, continue to ask your questions. But let me go through a couple here. A couple for you first, Pat. How many people at the Lupus Foundation work on cryptocurrency?
So that's one of the good parts of this system. Not a whole lot. For the RFP, we really just had to write up an RFP for a system for managing healthcare data the same way as we would already. And then it's really on Alex then to find who they think or who he thinks would be the best to develop a solution that meets those standards, leveraging blockchain in a way to make it more efficient and work better. They didn't change the RFP intentionally to fit blockchain because you don't always need blockchain. And you see a lot of people using blockchain when you don't need it. In terms of accepting crypto, it's pretty passive. We have our finance department. If we receive a donation, by the time they log in, unless they're there in under 10 seconds, there's cash sitting in a custodial account, which they transfer over to LFA bank accounts. And then the marketing piece, we can't have it dominate. Obviously, we can't just become, a crypto hype organization at the Lupus Foundation. But Alex has drafted out the social media plan and then the timing and targeting outside of the organization, how to integrate that in, mostly on Twitter, because that's where a lot of this activity occurs. And then we're just going to have to plug that into our media plan. Steve Gibson, in terms of getting media trained and where he wants to speak, that's totally up to him. But the drafting of the press release was Alex. The drafting of the social media content is Alex. Integrating it in and explaining to them why they're doing it in the first place. For those who weren't part of the education sessions, probably takes the most time on his end if they're less familiar. But it's not a whole lot of work on the part of the organization unless you want a huge chunk of the management team flying around to conferences.
Yeah. One piece I just add is it's really as much or as little as you want. So like Pat said, if everyone wants a ton of training, everyone can have a ton of training, but there's, it's really customizable in terms of how much you want to do.
And then there's another question here. During the gala, the attendees had to sign up for the crypto account and connect to their bank account, and then they scan the QR code. Is that correct? I think that was more, you were focusing on folks that were already in crypto. Is that right?
That's exactly right. So those tax benefits and everything else, that's for people who trade crypto, so the existing community. It wasn't like we had our board sitting at a table signing up for cryptocurrency accounts, which I'm sure would have been chaos. If you wanted to do it, you'd have to pay, transaction fees and everything else, sort of unnecessarily, but that's just on the exchange. It's still smaller than credit cards and everything else, but you'd still be going in and changing cash over unnecessarily. But no, we're not encouraging our regular donor base to buy crypto and send it in that format instead. It's really to accommodate an existing market.
Yeah, in other words, it was just one option of a way you can donate. The traditional methods still applied.
Great. And then as much as you can, someone asked how much Lupus has raised via cryptocurrency. I'm not sure how much that you can divulge, but I think when we were talking about this, Pat, you mentioned something that was pretty interesting about how many extra normal donations came in because of the market situation.
Yeah, so we did it toward the end of 2018 during a market slide. So tax benefits shift on that, which is why we kind of shifted energy toward generating attention. And when the market's going down, we kind of see people being more excited when traditional stakeholders are getting in anyhow. So the excitement piece and the marketing, the awareness, and the ability to get stories out further and wider, just using the community as kind of a toolkit, was the way that we approached it. But we still did get onto that crowdfunding platform, which was in a transition. 2019, we'll have a better look at how much we can raise on that. But we came in, they had a small match toward the end of the year. We came in second out of 16 or 17 charities on there. Alex made it a little bit more targeted, but they're not huge in terms of awareness, how big they are yet, but they're carving up some market share. And then at the gala, that was our only real targeted getting crypto donors to a location donating to us. We raised over 5,000. So it's kind of tough to pin down how many people came to us because they use crypto, but donated cash because the market was down and they would prefer to hold the asset at that point. But that was definitely a part of it as well. So I would say, it's only been since October, but in those last couple months in 2018, it was low 5 figures.
Great, thanks. And then Alex, a question for you. Are you in the giving block working with any Canadian clients?
Not at the moment, or in a sense, none that are headquartered in Canada, but they may have operations in Canada, if that makes sense.
Anything keeping you from, there's no legal reason or anything that's keeping you from working with Canadian clients, though, right?
Correct. I can work with people all over the world. We have clients that we're talking to now in Europe and Asia as well. There's really no limitations geographically for this.
Got it. Thanks. And then you mentioned space a lot, and what are you exactly referring to? And then also, what is KOL?
What was the first one? Space?
Oh, I think you
Yeah.
mean like the cryptocurrency space.
Okay. Yeah. The space, the in the sense, the industry or the community around cryptocurrency and blockchain is what I meant by that when I say the crypto space or the blockchain space. Um, and then KOL is key opinion leaders. So, these people who have podcasts, are writing articles, well-known authors in the space, or people that are often, highly regarded for their opinions on cryptocurrency and blockchain more generally.
Oh, great. And then one other question in here, and again, continue to feel free to ask your questions. Last one I'm showing right now is any other information regarding current trends that you're seeing out there for nonprofits in cryptocurrency, or anything you expect to see. You're reading the tea leaves.
Yeah, so one interesting thing that happened very recently was we saw a partnership between a major cryptocurrency and ALS. I think it was just last week, I think. They got about a little over $400,000 so far in cryptocurrency donations due to a partnership with a couple major crypto organizations. And more broadly, I think we're going to start seeing more and more of those kind of partnerships because there's still a lot of nonprofits and a lot of blockchain projects out there that just haven't found a partner yet. But I think you'll start seeing also, in the early days of this, it was a lot of just Bitcoin donations, and now you're seeing donations in the form of other cryptocurrencies as well. And that's why we like to offer a variety of options for that.
One piggyback on the ALS piece is, if I'm not mistaken, the vast majority of that cryptocurrency raise was from the CEOs of the two respective organizations, right?
Right. Yeah. It was the 400,000 was a $250,000 donation and a $150,000 donations from two partner CEOs.
So it was the organizations in the crypto space gave to them directly. It wasn't like a micro fundraising campaign. It was, they had a targeted partner, and the partner made a major contribution in it, not in exchange for, but so that they could partner with them and do a co-promoted marketing campaign.
Great stuff. Another question came in. Have you heard of Kudo Donate, and what are your thoughts on them if you have?
Kudo Donate.
I have not heard of them.
Yeah,
right now.
I'm just looking at that. By donating your idle computer time to your favorite charity, simply install, press play. Okay, so that's, nope, I hadn't heard of it before then.
I've heard of similar things to this. I'm just looking at their webpage now. I hadn't heard of this one particularly.
It's like an Internet of Things adaptation. So that's outside of cryptocurrency and blockchain. They're the tech communities.
So I think what this is it's donating your computing power to actually mine cryptocurrencies.
That's fantastic.
And actually a cool example of this is there's actually a basketball team, I want to say it's the Spurs, who have set up mining facilities to mine cryptocurrencies for charities, Ethereum specifically. But I think this is a cool concept. I can't say just at first glance too much about Kudo, but I think it's a potentially cool concept that we'll see more of down the road.
Yeah, great stuff. Well, I think we're nearing the end of our time, and that's all the questions. Again, just want to thank Pat and Alex so much for their time. Hearing Pat and Alex talk, they just really get it, and that's one of the reasons why I partnered up with Alex and the Giving Block, because they're very similar in mindset to what we do here at Cathexis, and hearing them talk about partnering up with folks and really making a difference and trying to find solutions to everyday issues and new ways of raising money for your mission. That's what this is all about. So can't thank you guys enough for your time, and thank you for everybody attending today. Before I sign off, I do have one more poll that I'd like to go ahead and kick off here. So let me go ahead and launch that. Basically, the question that you should be seeing now is, has the presentation improved your perception of cryptocurrency? And if you could go ahead and select one of those, I will leave that up here for another moment or two. Hopefully we've done our job. I'm going to go ahead and close that out. Oops, should have shared the results. Yeah. Good. All right. We did our result. We did our job here. Well done, guys. So hopefully this has helped. If we can be of any future help in the future, definitely don't hesitate to reach out to myself or Alex. We're always here to help, and we will be sharing a recorded version of this session for anybody to review after the fact. Thank you again, everybody, very much for your time today.
Yeah, thank you, Mark, too. Really appreciate it.
You bet. All right. Have a good day, everybody.
Thanks.